October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. 1 in 8 women in the U.S. will develop invasive breast cancer in her lifetime. But the statistics are more alarming for women of color, and that's what we want to talk about today. Marva Overton is a wonderful woman who is trying to change this right here in our community. She is the executive director for the Alliance for African American Health in Central Texas. Marva, thanks so much for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Hannah.
Yes, ma'am. And I know a black woman in Central Texas who gets breast cancer is twice as likely to die compared to a white woman with a similar diagnosis. Could you explain a little why that is?
Sure, Hannah. As you mentioned, 1 in 8 women annually are usually diagnosed with breast cancer. And for black women, unfortunately, the mortality rate is almost twice that of white women. And where there's no, one reason for that, there are several factors that play into it. So one is that the stage at which the cancer is diagnosed is sometimes later. And the later the diagnosis, the more likely it is that it's advanced stages and would be harder to treat. Also, sometimes it's just the type of tumor. Women sometimes develop tumors that are more aggressive, and that can play a part into the higher mortality. And then also there can be delays in getting treatment once you're diagnosed. As I would say that, once you are diagnosed, the imperative to start treatment as soon as possible is important. And then I would also just say that, some of the same factors that cause disparities in health outcomes in many areas, and breast cancer being one of them, is a factor. We still have persistent inequities in income and education, environmental conditions, access to quality health care. All of these things play a role in health outcomes. So as we have to address things on a system level in order to try to improve the numbers for black women, but all of these are some factors that play into that higher mortality rate. So even though the diagnosis rate is a little less, the rate of mortality is significantly higher.
Absolutely, and I can only imagine how the pandemic has really played a part in that. I think so many women especially are kind of in survival mode with children and working and balancing so many things. What have you seen personally, especially with women of color, maybe not being able to get that checkup or get that screening?
Right. Well, absolutely. The pandemic has had an impact, and many women have either not gotten, mammograms or delayed, and that's just across the board. Well, because at one point, they were not able to, and there have been studies that have been done that are showing that we might have a higher mortality in the later years because of the fact of late diagnosis or delayed screening. So the one thing that I would say is that even though, these studies are showing this could happen, that is not an inevitability. And I would encourage all women, particularly African-American women who may have not been screened during the pandemic, which we are still in, but the rate of persons being able to be seen now is much higher than it was in 2020. So don't delay. This is just like an issue that you would have with an automobile or house repair, right? If you put it off, the bigger it'll get, and when it comes time where you will have to deal with it, it can be worse and more costly. So definitely we want to go ahead and try to get those numbers back up when it comes to screening.